Today, it's Edwin's Monday evening property rant. Well, hello, and it's International Property Rant number 2 with our friend Edwin. Hi, Edwin, how are you going?
I'm doing well, Martin. How are you going?
Yeah, pretty good, actually. Lots happened since last week. I'm now in the house, got broadband connected, so I'm actually on a decent piece of string rather than what I was using last time, which was a mobile hotspot, which was actually very, very weak. So I'm now on a full-size broadband network, and it makes a huge difference. I can actually do things now. I haven't got any furniture, so I'm standing up today. I'm in the kitchen because that's the only place where I've got a bench. So I might take a shot afterwards and just overlay it so people can laugh at a little bit of the craziness we've got here. But nevertheless, we are up and running. And I noticed that you're saying there's craziness everywhere, basically, at the moment.
Look, it's very, very hard to separate fiction from reality. This is the thing. Like, I mean, you got some of the Twitter arts out there, like Earl Holdings. He's put up on Twitter the caption of the 7 News Brisbane post. It reads, "Australians are spending up big on experiences despite soaring inflation." I mean, I thought we were in a lot of strife, Martin, but it looks like people are spending. Can we not learn the lesson?
Well, it's interesting to question where they're getting the money from. Of course, there was a lot of savings made through COVID, and people also, of course, took money out of superannuation thanks to government stimulus and the rules that were there. So people had a lot of money. But I'll tell you what I'm seeing in my surveys, and that is that more people are now continuing to spend, but by using credit. So the savings ratios come way down, but people are actually still used to that style. So what they're doing is just putting more on credit. So how long can that go on for, I guess, is the question.
That's it. Well, back to 2019, where we were reporting on the real estate officers that were, some of them were on 2, 3, even 4 credit cards to pay off the debts. I mean, we just love to spend. And this is perhaps one of the other reasons why we're not seeing a lot of properties on the market, is because this is one way to stave off the bank. I mean, it's a dangerous way to stave off the bank, because once you default on the credit cards, that's it. It's all over. It's all over Red Rover. But look, the listed numbers that we'll talk about later on are obviously going to, are a little bit concerning. But they're going to, as I called it, they're going to drop, I believe, further into the winter season. But we're holding hope for spring. But the world gets wackier as we move on and as we move forward, Martin. Now let me ask you a question. So if you turned up to an open for inspection, right? So if you turned up for an open for inspection, and the leading agent greets you at the front door, and you can smell that he's had a bath in Johnny Walker, hopefully it was Johnny Walker Blue, and he reeks of alcohol, you've got 3 options. What would you do? The first, you turn around and walk away. The second, you make a quick offer on the property, sign the contract and give it to him and hope that he takes it and accepts the offer. Or do you ask if there's hors d'oeuvres or appetizers before the auction? What do you do, Martin?
Well, my first reaction would be probably to walk away. Drunk in charge of an auction, huh?
Oh, it's crazy. I think that's a pressure that a lot of agents are on. I mean, George talks about it. Talks about the issues that property managers mainly are going through in the industry. And look, it's a real pressure. The mainstream media talk about the property prices going up, the rebound, the dead cat bounce, whatever you want to call it, and beating the chest about clearance rates and also the high prices that are being achieved at some auctions. But at the end of the day, these poor bastards are the ones that are feeling it out there. It's the salespeople that are feeling it out there, because again, you and I have been talking now for how long now, there's not a lot of transactions. And what transactions is what keeps offices healthy. What's kept the offices going and many businesses going during the post 2020 up to now has been the stimulus that the government has thrown at the different industries and at the different businesses. But guess what? This party is coming to an end, and we just see how many more. We're just going to see how many offices are going to close down. My prediction is 20 to 30% will close down over the next 12 months.
Well, it's very interesting because the sales volumes, as you say, are significantly down. And I was talking to an agent actually from Australia the other day, and he was saying that he's chasing his tail because there are properties coming on the market that want to list, but a lot of them are actually not particularly attractive properties. And, he's got quite a few people interested in property, but not interested in the type of property that's coming on the market. So he's running faster and faster and faster to essentially write less and less business. So I'm not sure how that's going to work. And the other point, of course, is that the agents that are involved in the rental sector, and there are quite a few of those, of course, are also under the gun too. Interestingly, the same agent said to me that his rental team had less business than previously. Why? Because quite a few property investors have actually sold their properties or are trying to sell their properties and are not letting them. It's a mess, Edwin. It's a mess.
Oh, look, it is, Martin, and this is what a lot of people don't understand is how this is changing from week to week, month to month, right? The ledger, properties are going from one side of the ledger to the other side, and this is where I've been saying for a while that the industry is in a lot of pain. The other thing that's not really been discussed or talked about, that you and I have been raising it for a while now, is the issue with private lettings. So this is something else, Martin, that's happening, and that is, as you know, the WeChat chatterers are basically, they can't let the properties through the normal traditional means in order to break the rental ceilings that they need to break in order to keep their investments and maintain the high yields. So what do? Is they've got to basically self-manage them. And by self-managing, again, that's more properties that are coming off those books, less business for property managers and property management teams, and it's a vicious cycle. Again, I believe at least 30% of the real estate industry is going to leave. It's going to be forced to leave. 30 to 40% of offices will close down because they're not making a lot of coin. And you're going to see in the future, we're going to see more and more of these derelict homes being rented not through your normal channels but through private channels, and it's just going to be a mess. But then again, Martin, you and I have been saying things have got to break before they can be fixed, and unfortunately things aren't broken just yet.
No, indeed. And it's interesting, the latest CoreLogic numbers show that prices on average were slightly higher. No, not dramatically, but slightly. And I'm fascinated how the industry has now argued themselves to say, well, we've hit the bottom, prices are going to go up from here, right? And so they're arguing that the lack of supply, the migration, et cetera, is going to drive prices higher. And then you've got the other people on the other side of the fence, including quite a few economists, saying, well, hang on, we've still got the rental problem, and we've also got the interest rate cliff, 800,000 loans due to reset. And in fact, July and August is going to be the real peak, according to recent data that I saw. And that's going to put a downward pressure. Plus, of course, inflation is high, and cost of living continue to run rampant, and incomes are not necessarily following. So I'm fascinated by this dichotomy of views between the people one side saying it's all good, prices are going to go high, you should buy now, and people on the other side of the fence saying, oh, it looks like it's going to fall further. Now, as you and I have said, of course, talking averages doesn't really help, but it is interesting just to see that divergence. And of course, the mainstream media have been talking up dramatically over the last 2 or 3 weeks. The bottom is here, and everybody should pile in. I think there's more propaganda there than reality, frankly.
Well, look, this is where you and I have been discussing and saying to people over and over again, buying property, getting into property, buying and selling, you've got to look at all the factors. You've got to take everything into consideration. People have to buy for various reasons. People also have to sell for various reasons. But if you have to buy, if you want to buy, and you're, if you're inkling to buy right now, well, you just got to be careful as to what you buy, where you buy, and look at things, myopically, or look at things, in a granular way. Because
granularity isn't myopic. Granularity is actually the right thing to do, right? As you and I have said. But unfortunately, quite a few people just have a quick glance, say, "Oh, she'll be right," and move on. But no, ever more important now to be really, really concentrated and look at all of the information at a granular level and make sure that you've got the full information in front of you. And of course, those surveys and everything else that you need if you're going to buy, probably more than ever, it's critical.
Yeah, and this is where we've been talking and discussing over and over again with our to our followers and with the viewers and those people that follow us also on Twitter. And there are a lot of things that are going on out there. I mean, I've shared a post with you that you'll put up in the on this podcast, on this video, with regards to people doing extensions and renovations to homes that are not council approved, and the owners don't know, the agents have got no clue, and guess what? People are going in there blindfolded, buying these properties because of a lot of emotion, because of FOMO that's out there, and this is and they don't know what they're getting into. And unfortunately, the team that's behind them don't do the research properly. They themselves, they don't go out and inspect the properties, right? And they're also relying on building test reports provided by the owners or the owners' agents. So they're very sketchy at best. And what we're going to see, and this is where a lot of people have got to be extremely careful, is we're going to see a mass flow of our WeChat chatterers, because they are calling buy, Martin, at the moment. That was the chatter over the weekend that Dusty was monitoring over the 4 or 5 investment groups in Sydney, and they are all out in a buying frenzy, and we're going to see a lot more WeChat chatterers out there buying. But again, these people are buying for different reasons, not your traditional reasons, and they're buying from an investment point of view because they can squeeze your typical $800 a week investment property. That could squeeze another $300-400 out of it by basically playing a little bit of shenanigans and turning 4-bedroom homes into 7-8-bedroom homes with 4 or 5 bathrooms and letting each room on a cash basis. So that's how they're doing it. So if you start chasing that FOMO, if you start chasing that movement, and you're going to stand toe to toe with these investors, and they're going. And as I say, the Sydney market's not a big market, so it's going to show momentum. It's going to show an upward swing in a lot of suburbs, and people are going to get scared, and they're going to basically, because they're being scared and the fear of missing out, unfortunately, they get dragged into that slipstream, and they start throwing their money around as well. And obviously begging and borrowing from friends and families and mum and dad, and playing crazy games, not knowing what's coming ahead, like you mentioned earlier on, with regards to the 800,000 mortgages coming to the end of the tenure, in the middle of the year. So we just got to keep a close eye on the numbers and not follow what everybody else is following. Just be very sober with the approach that you take to buying or choosing even a rental.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's interesting, Edwin. I did a post earlier in the week, or actually last week now, I suppose, relating to investors. And I was making the point that quite a few investors had actually found that whilst their rents had been increased a little, so they got a little bit of an increased return, the rising mortgage rates was completely offsetting any income gain that they got from the rents. And so more people were actually selling their investment properties. There's probably about 20% less investors' properties than previously. And I had a torrent of comments and private messages as well from investors who said, yeah, you're absolutely right. We've actually put our property on the market, or we've sold our investment property because we cannot make the economics work. And I think this is something that really needs to be shouted from the rooftops, because I still see the property spruikers talking about great time to buy an investment property, blah, 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 multiply up, cross leverage, get multiple properties, et cetera, et cetera. It's nonsense. It really is very risky at the moment. And the truth is, on the ground, many property investors are actually exiting rather than actually coming into the market, which of course is then putting more pressure on the rental sector and the existing properties that are available to rent, as we'll come on to in the numbers in a moment. But it is interesting that now people are actually coming out of the woodwork and saying, yep, we've actually sold or we're trying to sell. And again, we've said this, and it's worth underscoring again, because I think it's so critical, that the changed regulations around investment properties and what you need to do, it varies by state, but there are more boxes you need to tick in terms of being able to actually offer your property officially in the rental sector. And those extra costs are just another nail in the coffin for many investors. So it's a really fascinating thing that's going on at the moment. And I have a feeling that we're going to see this in spades over the next months.
Look, it's happening out there. We've been talking about what the real estate agents are telling us, and but we also go back to the traditional means of renting. So unless you're really prepared, if you really want to go out there and be a property tycoon and start buying properties and investment properties, and if you think you're going to you think you're going to service those loans and cross collateralizing, as you say, and servicing all those loans by the normal means and the traditional means of property management, well, you've got rocks in your head, really, and you're really walking on. You're starting to tread on quicksand or on the surfaces of lava flow. It's a dangerous game to play. But unfortunately, what we are also seeing, and many of family and friends that we've talked to, they talk about how in certain areas investors are coming in, but when you start really breaking the groups that are coming in to buy those properties, it comes back the majority of the time, Martin, it comes back to the WeChat chatters, the local Chinese investors that, again, for the sake of our followers and our viewers, they do not follow your traditional means of renting the property. They will turn a 2-bedroom apartment into a 4-bedroom apartment with 6 beds in order to sustain the mortgage. So it's very hard. It's very difficult to do it under the normal means. So I guess in a way, in the numbers that we'll talk about later on, Martin, is what I'm seeing, what I'm noticing is the apartment numbers in Sydney, more so in Sydney, they're starting to grow in terms of apartments for sale. And I would say that's your traditional investors are coming on the market because it's obviously getting harder. Not as many homes are coming on by way of from investors. A lot of them are from downsizers or your empty nesters, basically from the people that can't afford to maintain them because they're just too big and too costly to maintain them. But even then, the numbers are really small. As I say, we're almost going to go back to the 2021 figures. But what is noticeable is the apartment numbers coming up. So that would perhaps is anecdotally would be, from what you've shared, is one of the reasons why we're seeing that, because a lot of your traditional investors, property holders, they're not going to go out there and self-manage. They're not going to go out there and knock on the doors and ask every individual in the apartment to cough up the $250 per bed that they've leased out. You know what I mean? So this is something that people have got to be very, very careful about.
Yeah, no, exactly right. And again, there are no easy answers at the moment, I think, but it's certainly quite fascinating. In fact, let's do the numbers now, because this has really been quite an interesting week. Louis Christopher, of course, came out and said, well, he's seeing the listings starting to rise, still lower than previously, but listings were beginning to rise. But it is very patchy, isn't it?
Look, it is. I guess Louis Christopher looks at it at a national level. We're looking at it more into the Sydney regions and your Melbourne regions. Yep. Look, the numbers are as steady as almost the same as last week. Yep. They're a little bit higher. There are a few hundred more listings on market, but as I said, they are predominantly apartments that have come on the market in the Sydney region. The homes, they're pretty much are tracking almost the same figures. There's not much difference between them. So again, it's really one of those those things that you've got to look at each suburb. You've got to look at each area of Sydney as we've said, there's approximately 636 suburbs in the Sydney metropolitan area, and about 35 or 34 LGAs. So it's, and all these listings are spread out, all over the place. So not a lot of numbers. I can't see the numbers in Sydney grown. Melbourne as well. It'd be consistent to last week's numbers, Martin. But again, we see a bit of a growth in the, on the side of in Melbourne, we see a bit of a growth on the side of the houses as opposed to apartments, which is rather interesting because it's been like that for a few months now, where the home listings have outpaced the apartments in Melbourne over perhaps the last 6 months. Auctions are not very, they still, that really shows me the enthusiasm or the lack of enthusiasm that's in the market, albeit these weeks are the school holidays, but they're not as, they're not like they would be. Maybe after the school holidays, if they get closer to 1,000 auctions per week in Sydney, then people are going to be more enthusiastic about selling and achieving the prices that they would like to achieve, because otherwise they're going to be keeping the properties off the market throughout the colder months and get them ready for the spring sales.
Well, I do think that's a very important point, Edwin. I think the spring is going to be a really interesting season, right? Because by then, the higher rates will have come through. My own perspective, by the way, is I think it's unlikely the Reserve Bank will be able to cut rates. They may have to lift rates further. And certainly we're going to be above 3% from a cash rate perspective right through next year as well, unless the economy falls off a cliff, which I'm not sure it will. So that means that we're going to see a very interesting situation later in the year where the pressures on households and the pressure on the property sector could be quite intense. So I will be fascinated to see whether, in fact, we start to see those listings rise again, or whether, in fact, the tide goes out even further. And as I said the other day, and I'll say it again, I'm not convinced that the significantly higher migration numbers that are around at the moment will naturally lead to a lot of additional property purchases, maybe in the rental sector, but not actually property purchases, at least in the short term. So it is a fascinating thing to see. So we're going to see cooler months continuing to dip. What happens then? Well, it's anybody's guess, I guess.
Yeah, look, and we just got to take it week by week and, at a stretch, month by month. But I'm still calling low numbers for the next 2 to 3 months. Because in a lot of places, in a lot of areas, the punters, the sellers are not achieving the prices that they would like to achieve. And with a lot of them now home vesting, and they've got the facility to home vest, and the government, as you remember, the Perrottet government encouraged home vesting as well, to rent out your rentals, and that's why one of the reasons why you ran away to England, because you didn't want to rent out your other 10 bedrooms in your house. So it's just one of those things that people are doing, and look, it's real. It is happening. You've got there's anecdotal chatter on Twitter with regards to what's happened also in Queensland, and because the cost of living is just too high. So it's one way to absorb that the rental pressures that are out there. But is it a short-term fix? Is it going to be a long-term solution? One thing for sure is life isn't getting cheaper; it's getting costlier. But look, I think I don't look. It's hard to call, as you said. It's hard to call what's going to happen, months ahead. But I am hopeful that we end up with a lot more properties on the market in spring than what we have, and because whilst the immigration floodgates are open, Martin, it is becoming harder. And the other what would you call it, the WeChat chatters, those punters, they're a big force, and they can change the dynamics in suburbs if not in cities.
No, absolutely. And I do think that's why it's important to go granular again, because not all property buyers are the same. I was talking again to somebody the other day in regional Australia, not a million miles from where I was living previously before I came over here to the UK. And they are seeing now significant falls in price. And they're also seeing significant less demand for rental properties in the regions. So I think the regions are going to be where a lot of the drafts are going to be felt, because of course we had that massive run up thanks to the post-COVID stimulus. And now it's all turning around. So maybe closer into Sydney and Melbourne and the other major urban centres, it's different. But I also noticed there was an article talking about WA and the fact that people are suddenly waking up to the fact that WA's property market is still out of kilter. And of course, the costs of living and everything else are biting there too. So I think we're going to see quite a lot of difficulty in different areas. But like we keep saying, you can't just talk averages. You can't talk at the top level. You have to go quite granular to really understand the dynamics differently. Now, here's the question for you. When you get a survey on a property and the surveyor says, I wasn't able to look at this because I couldn't get access. I couldn't look at this because the cupboard was full, and I didn't go up into the roof space because the roof space cavity wasn't big enough for me to get in. What would that tell you, Edwin?
Well, look, over the years, it's told me more things than one, and that is the majority of the time there's a lot of things that are being hidden, right? And they don't want to be disclosed. And the building inspection reports, their caveats are that if they can't get access, and it's just a visual report, anyways. Look, if you can prove, and there are ways to prove, if you can prove that both the agent or the building inspector or the owner colluded in to not disclose certain issues within in the property, well, you can't take them to task. I always say, if you believe that that they're colluded, if you can have some sort of evidence, even if it's soft or light evidence, you need to approach fair trading, and sometimes that's enough to scare the wind, and scare them a bit, and then put the wind up them and get things resolved and mitigated one way or another. But a lot of people don't do it. A lot of people don't follow with legal proceedings on it, because they fear that it's going to be very costly. They fear the process, and then they just say, oh, it's a learning curve, and they absorb it and they move on. That's the unfortunate thing. The other side to that coin is also there are a lot of cases that do get mitigated. However, they get settled outside of the courts, basically, and they don't get recorded. So we don't hear about a lot about those matters. So one of the things that I always say to people is, if you suspect that there's been an extension done to a property, if you suspect that there's been any recent works done to the property, ask for the certifications, ask for the certificates, ask for the guarantees. If the agent tells you that bathrooms have been recently renovated, ask them for the waterproofing certificates. And you've got to pass those conversations. You've got to pass that information to your conveyancer or your solicitor that's doing your conveyance, in order for them then to do further searches and ask the other side for the proper documentation. A lot of conveyancers just read what's in front of them. They don't know whether that being extensions done to homes. They don't know what's being done or what you're seeing and what you've been told, unless you convey that information to them. So, and this is what we saw on the weekend, Martin, with some of these some of the properties where, after I had the pleasure of not only talking to the agent in that video that I sent through to you, but also spoke to the owner when the owner came, after the open house. He was around, and I had a conversation, and the conversation was rather interesting. The owner didn't even know that the extension to the rear of his home, being, on average, he was about, 25, 28 square meters extended to the rear. They took out a load-bearing wall. He had no engineering certificates. He had no DA. He says that the council told him he didn't need a DA. I get the feeling that what he meant was that he could have, in that particular council, didn't require a DA, but it could be done through CDC. But you still need the proper certification, right? and obviously he didn't get it. And that renovation was done, approximately 3 years ago. But unless you look for things and you ask for things, you think, oh, gee, what a nice kitchen, what a nice extension, albeit it looked a little bit weird from the outside, but from the inside looks a little bit plush. So people fall for it, and guess what, Martin? They move forward, and then later on they'll have issues with the council, they'll have issues with the regulators, and you could be given basically a demolition order, and there goes an extra 100, 200,000 in order to get things rectified, and you end up with 2/3 of a house rather than the full house that you thought you bought.
Absolutely. No, I mean, this is really, really critical stuff we're talking about here. And what prompted my initial question was, I had my first one-on-one since I been in the UK. So I'm now getting back to my one-on-one service, and I've got a few scheduled over the next couple of weeks. But this particular person got the surveyor's report from the vendor for a property he was looking at, right? And it was all full of these caveats and couldn't see this, didn't know that, et cetera, et cetera. And he said, well, is this serious? And I said, well, I don't know. But if I were you, what I would do is to get an independent surveyor's report. Exactly. Rather than actually rely on the vendor's report, which, is done by the vendor on behalf of the vendor for the vendor. So, draw your own conclusions. And it was very interesting because the other report that they got, and it took about a week for the surveyor to go and have another look and, basically do a completely independent view, a different surveyor. All of those areas that were not accessible, or, the cupboard was full, et cetera, they actually looked in all of those areas and they discovered a lot of defects. So many defects, in fact, that they decided to walk away from the purchase that they were thinking of doing. And I think this is another important object lesson, is that you cannot rely on the vendor's survey report. It is no more really than a marketing document with bells on. And if you are going to buy a property, it's really important to get your own independent report, not least because, of course, it gives you more protection later, should anything else by way of the defect arise. But it amazes me that when people make these big financial investment decisions, they do it without actually even the basic due diligence.
Well, that's right. And look, on average now in Sydney, you're paying 600, 650. You could pay up to 750 with thermal imaging of the entire house. Yeah, that's what our guys charge us. Once we've got our heads of agreement on price, and we just do the final checks and balances post my personal inspections of the properties from all our team members to make sure that we're not wasting our time on even spending the extra $700, because it's fascinating to see what these, in some of these reports, what they put down, where they couldn't move the poor little bunnies couldn't move a 10-litre can of paint from the access point to go into the subfloor area of the house. And when you push that to the side and you open the door, the access door there, you find puddles, and if you put your foot in there, I'm sure it's gonna get bitten off by crocodiles. So it's just one of these things. I see this, man. I see it all the time. We joke about it, but there's some shit that I'm seeing out there. It's crazy. But look, I'll go further and say, look, people have got to also be careful of the insulation. A lot of the reports don't come back with what type of insulation it is. It just says it has insulation or doesn't have insulation. Most of the time, the inspectors don't even take photos in the roof cavity areas, but get yours that you appoint. Ask them specifically that you want them to take specific photos of the roof space, and also take particular note of what type of insulation. Because if you got this cellulite, you could have the cellulose fiber, and you could have by sheer misfortune, you could have the old from Mr. Fluffy, the old cellulose fiber from Mr. Fluffy that contains asbestos. But the other stuff that's mainly up there in a lot of houses, what they call the cellulose fiber, which is really just mashed up paper, but that also contains a lot of chemicals that seep through, and the chemicals seep through the ceiling gyprock in the cornices and the light fitting areas, and they drop down. So a lot of that stuff is not reported in the reports that you get, and you don't know. The other thing is your wet areas, and in some of these older homes, or that still contain asbestos. I mean, the list just goes on and on, Martin. But yeah, definitely, it's worth spending. If you're going to be spending now, I think the average home is $1.4 million now in Sydney. So I'd say $700 to get your own private inspector to walk through a house and spend at least an hour to 2 hours there doing a proper and thorough inspection is worth the while.
Absolutely. It's an investment, I think, rather than an expense. And it's a really important thing to do, particularly in this environment where a number of the properties that are actually on the market are perhaps not necessarily top notch, and particularly where there's work to be done. Okay, Edwin, anything else we need to cover today, or have we done?
I thought we'd, Philip Seuss, you've had him on the show before. He put up an interesting tweet, Martin, with regards to the immigration. And if I could just read what the tweet, the section that he cut out.
Yep.
I mean, he's very. I like his dry sense of humor. Sometimes it's really, he puts out the tweet. What the hell? To deal with housing shortages caused in large part by the extremist immigration program, we apparently have to then import more immigrants to building houses for the immigrants we just let in. Yes, this is the Guardian. Lord help us. And that was in reference to a Guardian post, right? So, and if I may read it, the part of it, reads, Australia is set to receive 650,000 migrants across this financial year and next. And while this will add more demand to the rental sector, especially in larger cities, 87% of migrants live in capital cities, according to the Bureau of Statistics. Experts say this will not necessarily fuel the rental prices. The managing director of the Australian Housing and Urban Research Institute, Michael Fotheringham, says increases in net migration could actually help by supplying more workers for the housing industry. If we want to build our way out of this problem, we need to, we need to address workforce shortages in residential construction, and migration is one of the fastest way to do that. I retweeted that and added my own comments. And if you recall, we've raised this issue before a while back, and that is the new migrants that are coming in. They are not going, somebody needs to tell these bureaucrats and these so-called experts that the new migrants that are coming in, they don't particularly see their future in construction. And even if they're looking more at your typically at your areas of hospitality, areas of the education, retail, health, other areas, but they're certainly not looking at the building industry, that because it's a new group of people that are coming, and a lot of these migrants that are also coming because they don't want to go into the building sector, the building industry, because it also the building and perhaps the future development that the New South Wales government will give a tick of approval, supported by the Fed. I would say it's not going to be central to the CBDs, but they're going to be further away from the CBDs. And again, as the article says, 87% of the people that come into are migrating and stay in the CBDs. They don't want to go out, but that's where I feel that the state government and the is going to have a big push to build developments and albeit high rise further away from the city centres, Martin. So it's it's a conundrum. As we said earlier on in at the beginning, it's becoming more and more difficult to separate fiction from reality.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the concept of we have more migrants coming in, so we need to bring more migrants in who are builders to be able to actually build stuff for the people who are coming in is a recursive argument that is a bit ridiculous. But as you say, the fact is that most of those migrants are actually not going to be builders. They're going to be in other sectors. And I don't know whether you saw, but last week there were a lot of people in the construction sector calling out the lack of new build and the fact that we were underbuilding significantly for the migration. Of course, the real issue is that this high migration number, it's a planned thing, right? So, Albo and the states together are actually trying to build big Australia because that's the only way to try and make the economics work. I fear that the high migration rates, the lack of housing affordability, and the lack of housing availability is going to create ghettos in some areas, and is really going to lead, I think, to a very significant fall in the standard of living for many. But hey, well, yeah, it's all about the numbers.
Yeah, it's all about the numbers. And this is why we've now got Sydney's Twilight Zone rental market, Martin. Again, that I sent you the screenshots of what was advertised over the weekend. And it's absolutely fascinating. I mean, this is an individual that's got a derelict home in Greenacre, but what the individual wants, again, it's in a tweet that I've sent to you. What the individual wants is basically somebody to come in, renovate the house, right? So whilst you're renovating the house, you live there rent free for the year that you're renovating it, and then he'll give you, the owner will give you will extend the lease by another 2 years at an agreed lease amount. So I did some quick calculations in my head, and I came up with a conclusion that based on the article and some of the old photos that I was able to track on the internet from this property, it needs a full gut job. So at cost, you'd be spending about $150,000 to renovate it. So my deduction from all that is, Martin, is once it's renovated, they're expecting to get $3,000 a week rent, right? Because so you put in the $150,000 to renovate the house, and so divided it by 50, right? So it's worth what, $3,000 a week? I mean, seriously, this is the state of the rental arena at the moment, and what's put out there, and it's crazy. And then the other one was that I also sent you was that granny flat that's being built out of CHEP pallets. I'm sure you're going to find that funny, and our viewers are going to have a good laugh at it over it. Seriously, these granny flats are going to be built out of CHEP pallets in people's backyards, but that's what you just mentioned earlier on. They're the slums that are coming to Sydney. I've already called the $1 million slums in the CBDs and your high your densely populated areas, close to the airport, your Chatswood, Hurstfields, and this where the strata managers are not keeping up with the maintenance of complexes, badly built high-rise developments, and now this. But and it just doesn't seem to me that the governments are still not looking at the underlying issues that we've got. My call would be to stop immigration altogether, put a pause, start looking at some of the solutions where people are facing now. Because on top of the immigration, what you and I spoke about is also the natural disasters that have occurred, north, south, east, and west of Sydney, and people by no fault of their own and no choice have migrated closer to your Sydney regions, and it's put a further strain on the rental arena. And let's not open up the other can of worms, Martin, the 1.2 million properties that are also vacant laying out there.
Yeah. Now, those vacant properties, Somebody sent me a message the other day saying, well, you said 1.2 million last year. Surely some of those could be used. Worth reflecting, of course, that some of those were second homes, on the coast or whatever, holiday homes. But a lot of them are actually in the high density development areas like Docklands, and property investors have bought them, but they've never, ever lived in them nor let them. And they're basically holding them as a long-term investment. And of course, you don't want anybody in the property, because if you have somebody in the property, it's used and therefore the value goes down. That, to my mind, is something that state and federal should be looking at, because I reckon there's at least 250 to 300,000 homes that could be brought back into service if, in fact, those were actually brought to market. Now, I know there's a question about free markets, et cetera, but surely it's not equitable for property investors to buy a property and then hold it vacant, not for a few months, but for years and years and years and years, on the principle that we'll get capital appreciation over a good number of years. Surely that should be something that should be on the agenda. But I haven't heard any state or federal MPs talking about the vacant property problem. And if you then add the Airbnb issue, short-term lettings, that's another one. Interestingly, in the UK here, certain areas, particularly in southwestern of England, they're actually starting to bear down on Airbnb and are starting to actually require planning permission, and other measures are being taken to try and stop more and more properties just being short-term let, not available for local residents. So I think there are levers that could be pulled, Edwin, other than just build more stuff. But of course, those are politically more difficult, and therefore nobody wants to touch them.
Oh, well, that's right. Look, and we've discussed many different ways, but in the meantime, people have just got to be very, very careful. Stay frosty, as we say, and be careful out there. Don't chase emotion. Don't think that that going toe to toe with developers or going toe to toe with the WeChat chatterers, the little the little aunties out there that are cashed up. They've got their reasons why they will pay over the odds for property. They've got to bring money from a cash economy into the system, because they're also reaching retirement. These are people that have had businesses here in Australia for decades, and they've got a hell of a lot of cash sitting underneath their mattresses at home, in all sorts of areas, and they've got to in a way wash that or bring that into the normal market, because otherwise what do they do with it as they get older themselves? So if you start getting emotional, if you start panicking when you're out there at auctions, when you're participating at auctions or dealing with agents, and if agents start pushing you and you're allowing them to push you, well, because you're potentially going to make the wrong decision, and you're going to make the wrong decision that you could it's going to cost you dearly, and you're going to regret for the rest of potentially the rest of your life.
Absolutely, Edwin. Well, we're coming to the end of the show. Any thoughts of the weeks from you this week?
Oh, look, the tip of the week is where was it? Well, I'm just scrolling down. I even forgot. Oh yeah, security. Secure your homes. Secure your properties. Your loved ones and your little friends. There's a lot going on from what we're hearing from our legal eagles that we deal with throughout Sydney, and that's crime is on the rise, and if you don't have good security systems, they're a lot cheaper now. You can get cameras to put around your home. Security is paramount, and don't go out there and do things silly and expose yourself to what's happening out there as well. And just stay frosty, stay calm, and protect your loved ones and your little ones as you move on. It's
good advice, Edwin. And interestingly, here in the UK, there's a similar issue. So crime is up, and more people are spending more on home security. And as you say, the video cameras and what have you are very cheap these days. So it's not that expensive, but it does make quite a difference. So it does seem to be the sign of the times, unfortunately. So you need to take steps to make sure that security is top of mind, and you put the old burglar alarm on when you go out and those sorts of things. It is a sign of the times, I fear.
Yeah, look, it is, but yeah, we've been warning people of different things over the years, and hopefully they take heed. I'm sure they do. Most of our followers do, and from the emails and the notes that we get over the weeks. So yeah, Martin, good luck to you with your new home there now that you're in, and hopefully very soon you'll have the studio up and running full steam.
Yeah. Well, hopefully, Edwin, I'm waiting for some furniture to be delivered today, and then I'll be able to sit down, which will be good. So hopefully when we talk next week, I will actually be at a desk rather than sitting at the or standing at the kitchen table, which is what I'm here at the moment. But anyway, great to catch up with you. Thanks very much. And I'll also try and get my Office application reinstalled on the computer here, so I can read stuff in real time. But really appreciate all the work on the notes, and we'll make sure all those graphics are included in the show. And we'll do it all again next week. I'm sure there'll be more to talk about.
All right, Martin. Take care. Stay
Cheers.
safe.
And the broadband is holding up really well, so I'm pleased. In fact, I tell you, your connection is better than it was where I was down in Thurrool. So I just worked that one out.
Oh, see, it wasn't me after all, Martin. It was you all along.
It must have been downhill, I think, to the coast. See ya. Take care. Bye-bye.
All the best. Bye.